During his son's wedding, the millionaire froze when he saw the waitress's ring. It was the same one he gave to his wife who disappeared 25 years ago. The Whitaker Estate sparkled like a diamond under the afternoon sun. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic rainbows across the grand ballroom, where the who's who of America's business elite mingled in anticipation of what the press had dubbed the merger of the decade. Not just a wedding, but a symbolic treaty between two warring corporate dynasties. Robert Hayes stood at the edge of the crowd, a glass of scotch nestled comfortably in his hand. At 62, he maintained the commanding presence that had made him a legend in real estate development. His silver hair and tailored Italian suit marked him as old money, though he'd built his empire from scratch. He watched with measured pride as his son Ryan, heir to the Hayes fortune, charmed guests alongside his soon-to-be bride. Quite the spectacle, isn't it? Harold Jennings appeared beside him, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Robert nodded curtly. 25 years as rivals, and now they would be family. The thought still felt strange, almost wrong. Your daughter looks beautiful, Harold, and your son looks worthy of her. Harold raised his champagne flute. To peace between our houses, Robert. They clinked glasses in a hollow toast. Both men knew that this marriage was strategic, a business arrangement dressed as romance. Grace Jennings would bring the Jennings pharmaceutical patents to the Hayes portfolio, while Ryan offered the global distribution network the Jennings empire had always lacked. As guests moved toward their tables for dinner, Robert scanned the room with the practiced eye of someone who never fully relaxed. That's when he saw her. A young waitress with dark hair pulled back in a simple bun. Something about her profile caught his attention, made his heart skip a beat. "Sir, would you care for champagne?" she asked, approaching with a tray. Robert froze. Those eyes, wide set, with that distinctive amber fleck in the left iris. Sarah's eyes, his first wife's eyes, looking back at him from a stranger's face. "Sir," she repeated, uncertainty crossing her features. "Yes, thank you," he managed, taking a glass mechanically as she turned to serve another guest. Sunlight from the window caught something on her right hand, a small emerald ring with an intricate gold setting. Robert's glass nearly slipped from his grasp. That ring, it couldn't be. Sarah's ring had been custom-made for their 5th anniversary, an emerald with a hidden compartment, inscribed with their initials and a date. It had vanished with her in the fire, 25 years ago, the fire that had claimed her and their newborn daughter. "Are you all right, Robert?" Harold's voice seemed to come from far away. "You look like you've seen a ghost." The choice of words was unnervingly apt. "I'm fine," Robert lied, watching the waitress move through the crowd. "Who's managing the catering staff today?" "Some local company, why?" Harold followed Robert's gaze, and his expression changed subtly when he spotted the young woman. A flash of something, recognition, fear, crossed his face before he composed himself. Robert made a mental note of Harold's reaction. "No reason. Excuse me." He moved casually toward the event coordinator, a nervous young man checking items off a clipboard. "The service is excellent," Robert commented. "That young waitress over there, what's her name?" The coordinator followed his gesture. "Oh, Zoe Harper. First time working with us, actually. Came highly recommended by Dr. Thompson." "Dr. Thompson. Your physician, sir, Luke Thompson. Said she needed the work." Robert's mind raced. Luke Thompson had been his personal doctor for 3 years now. Young, brilliant, exceptionally perceptive. He'd always felt an inexplicable comfort with the man, a sense of familiarity he couldn't quite place. And now this connection to a woman who wore Sarah's ring and had Sarah's eyes. Across the room, an elderly woman in the uniform of the Jennings household staff dropped a tray of glasses. The crash silenced conversations momentarily, but what drew Robert's attention was the woman's ashen face as she stared at Zoe. "Good Lord," the old woman whispered, loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "It's her face. It's Sarah's face." Harold was at the woman's side instantly, gripping her arm with barely disguised urgency. "Eleanor, you're confused. Let's get you some air." As Harold escorted the distressed woman out, Robert caught his eye. Something unspoken passed between them. A challenge. A threat. Or perhaps both. The wedding planner clapped her hands. "Places, everyone. The ceremony begins in 20 minutes. Guests began drifting toward the garden where white chairs waited in perfect rows. Robert, however, couldn't move. His world had tilted on its axis, old wounds torn open for 25 years. He'd believed the official report, electrical fire, spreading too quickly through the East Wing where Sarah had been recovering from childbirth. By the time the firefighters arrived, that section of the house had been engulfed. No remains were found. The heat had been too intense, they said. Robert had rebuilt his life, remarried, had Ryan with his second wife before their amicable divorce 10 years ago. He'd channeled his grief into building his business empire. And though he never forgot Sarah, he'd made peace with her loss. Or so he thought now, watching Zoe move through the crowd, her emerald ring catching the light. Doubts crept in like smoke. The timing of Harold's peace offering, proposing this marriage between their children just as his own company faced financial struggles. The way he'd hustled Eleanor away, the ring, those eyes. Robert pulled out his phone and texted his security chief. Background check. Zoe Harper, priority 1. Also, find everything on Luke Thompson's childhood now. He slipped the phone back into his pocket as Ryan approached. Dad, it's time? You okay? You look distracted? Robert forced a smile. Just thinking about your mother, your birth mother. She would have loved to see this day. Ryan squeezed his father's shoulder. At 23, he was the spitting image of Robert in his youth, except for his eyes. Blue like his mother's, not warm brown like Sarah's, not like Zoe's. Come on, Dad, I need you by my side. As they walked toward the garden, Robert caught sight of Zoe watching them, her expression unreadable. Behind her, Luke Thompson had appeared, handsome in a dark suit. Not as a server, but as a guest. The young doctor placed a protective hand on Zoe's shoulder. Leaning close to whisper something, Robert felt the ground shift beneath him again. They stood together like pieces of a puzzle he'd been trying to solve for 25 years. Pieces of his heart he'd thought were lost forever. Whatever game Harold Jennings was playing, whatever secrets were buried beneath the ashes of the past, Robert would uncover them. Today might be his son's wedding, but as he watched Zoe and Luke across the crowded room, he couldn't escape the feeling that it was also something else entirely. The beginning of the end of a lie that had lasted far too long. He saw it, Luke. I swear he recognized the ring. Zoe's whisper was urgent as they stood in the quiet service corridor behind the grand ballroom. Dr. Luke Thompson loosened his tie slightly, his usually calm demeanor showing cracks of concern. At 32, he had the confident bearing of someone who'd fought for everything he had. Yale Medical School hadn't come easy for an orphan with no family connections. Robert Hayes is no fool. Luke peered through the small window in the door, watching the wedding guests migrate toward the garden ceremony. Did you see Harold Jennings's face, like he'd seen a ghost? The old woman, Eleanor, she recognized me too. Called me Sarah. Zoe twisted the emerald ring on her finger nervously. What if this was a mistake, coming here like this? Luke turned to Zoe, his expression softening. With her dark hair and amber-flecked eyes, she looked nothing like him with his sandy hair and blue-gray eyes, yet they'd been inseparable since childhood, a bond that transcended their different paths. It wasn't a mistake, he said firmly. We deserve answers. 25 years earlier, Sunny Pines Orphanage, June 1999. The summer storm rattled windows in the old building as 6-year-old Luke huddled under a blanket with 7-year-old Zoe in the common room. Lightning illuminated their small faces as they whispered secrets under cover of thunder. Miss Martha says I'm getting adopted tomorrow, Luke said, his voice small. Zoe's eyes widened with both happiness and fear. Where will you go? A doctor and his wife from Connecticut. They said I can go to school and maybe be a doctor too. Tears welled in Zoe's eyes. You're leaving me. Luke clutched her hand fiercely. Never. I'll find you when I'm grown up, I promise. From her pocket, Zoe pulled out her most treasured possession, a small emerald ring she'd found sewn into the lining of her baby blanket. Take this, she insisted. For luck. Luke shook his head. I can't. It's your only thing from before, from your real family. You're my real family, she said, with a conviction beyond her years. Now we have to share it. You keep it until you're 18, then I get it until I'm 18, then you again. They had solemnly pinky sworn on it, the emerald catching the lightning flashes like a magical talisman. Present day. I kept my promise, Luke said now, touching the ring on Zoe's finger. When I found you again at 21, I gave it back, and you kept wearing it. Even when the research led us here. Zoe finished his thought. To the Hayes and Jennings families. Luke checked his watch. The ceremony's starting. I should get to my seat. Maintain my cover. And I need to serve champagne for the toast. Zoe straightened her uniform. Just be careful, Luke. If Harold Jennings really did what we think he did, he's dangerous. Luke acknowledged grimly. That's why we need proof before we make any accusations. They'd spent 3 years piecing together fragments of their past. It had started with the ring, Zoe's only link to her origins. When Luke became Robert Hayes' physician, it was no coincidence. They'd tracked the ring's unique design to a jeweler who remembered crafting it for the first Mrs. Hayes decades ago. What they hadn't anticipated was Robert's visceral reaction to seeing it, or Eleanor's outburst. Text me if anything happens, Luke said, giving Zoe's shoulder a reassuring squeeze before slipping into the garden through a side entrance. As a young, successful physician, Luke didn't look out of place among the guests. He'd cultivated a professional relationship with Robert Hayes over the past 3 years, carefully building trust while gathering information. What had started as a clinical curiosity, why he felt so strangely connected to his wealthy patient, had evolved into a mission when he reconnected with Zoe, and they compared notes about their mysterious origins. Taking his seat near the middle, Luke observed Robert Hayes at the front, standing beside his son. The older man seemed distracted, his eyes continually scanning the crowd. Luke's phone vibrated. A text from Zoe. R requested background check on both of us. Heard coordinator on phone. His jaw tightened. They'd prepared for this possibility, creating a paper trail that would withstand casual scrutiny. But Robert Hayes had resources. How long before he discovered the gaps? The string quartet began playing canon in D, signaling the bride's approach. Luke watched Harold Jennings walk his daughter down the aisle, the picture of paternal pride. Only Luke noticed his slightly too tight grip on Grace's arm, the tension in his smile. This man orchestrated a fire that killed Sarah Hayes and separated newborn twins, all to cover up financial fraud. The thought made Luke's blood boil. Years of medical training had taught him to maintain composure under pressure, but seeing Harold play the doting father tested those skills. After the ceremony, guests flowed back to the reception area. Luke circulated casually, eavesdropping on conversations, watching for anything useful. He noticed Robert cornering the wedding photographer, speaking intensely. "Make sure you get clear shots of all the staff," Robert was saying, "especially the wait staff. I'll pay extra." Luke moved closer to the bar, where Zoe was arranging champagne flutes. "Hayes is having photos taken of all staff," he murmured as he passed. "He's looking for something. Or someone," Zoe replied softly, not looking up from her task, across the room. Harold Jennings was speaking with Eleanor, the elderly housekeeper who had recognized Zoe. The woman appeared distraught, shaking her head repeatedly while Harold's expression grew increasingly stern. Luke casually shifted closer, pretending to admire a floral arrangement. "Impossible," he heard Harold saying. "Sarah Hayes died 25 years ago. This girl is nobody, Eleanor. Your mind is playing tricks. I helped deliver Mrs. Hayes' babies," Eleanor insisted. "I'd know those eyes anywhere." Luke froze. "Babies, plural. You're confused," Harold hissed. "There was one child who died with her mother in the fire. Now go home before you cause a scene." Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then why does that girl have Sarah's ring, the one with the secret compartment?" Harold's face paled. "What did you say?" "The emerald. I saw it when she served champagne. It was Sarah's ring, the one that went missing the night of the—" "Enough," Harold cut her off, grabbing her arm. "You're unwell. I'm calling my driver to take you home." As Harold marched the elderly woman toward the exit, he locked eyes with Luke. Recognition flickered across his face, not of Luke specifically, but of something in his features. For a heartbeat, the mask of the gracious host slipped. Revealing calculation and fear, Luke maintained an impassive expression, but his mind was racing. Babies. Not just Zoe, but potentially another child, could it be? Him? He'd always felt a bizarre kinship with Zoe, despite their different appearances. They'd assumed it was the shared experience of growing up in the same orphanage. But what if it was something more primal? What if they were siblings, twins, even? His medical training kicked in, mentally cataloging the possibilities. Fraternal twins could look quite different. And his birth date, the orphanage had estimated it, with no birth certificate to verify. Luke watched Robert Hayes continuing to observe Zoe from across the room. A man piecing together a puzzle whose picture was slowly becoming clear. The countdown had begun. Whatever truth lay buried beneath 25 years of secrets and lies would soon surface. Whether they were ready for it or not, the reception was in full swing, champagne flowing as freely as the orchestra's music. Robert Hayes stood by a window, phone pressed to his ear, his back to the celebration. "What do you mean there's nothing?" he demanded. "Everyone has a past." His security chief's voice crackled through the speaker. "That's just it, sir. Their pasts are too clean. Luke Thompson's records start at age 7 when he was adopted by the Thompsons in Connecticut. Before that, there's just a file number at Sunny Pines Orphanage. Same with Zoe Harper. She aged out of the same orphanage. No adoption. Their paper trails are like they were born at age 6 and 7. Robert's knuckles whitened around his phone. And the ring. Still searching for records of the jeweler who made it. Most businesses from that era haven't digitized their records from the 90s. Keep digging, whatever it costs. Robert ended the call, the weight of possibility settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. Across the room, Ryan was dancing with Grace, both of them glowing with the easy confidence of youth untouched by tragedy. Robert envied them that innocence, even as he feared what his investigation might do to their happiness. "Beautiful couple," observed a familiar voice. Robert turned to find Luke Thompson beside him, 2 whiskeys in hand. He offered one to Robert, who accepted it with measured caution. "Congratulations, Mr. Hayes. Your son seems very happy." Robert studied Luke's face, searching for, what? Sarah's features, his own. "You're not usually one for social events, Dr. Thompson." Luke smiled easily. "Make an exception for special patients. Besides, I have a friend working the event. Thought I'd offer moral support." "Zoe Harper." Robert sipped his whiskey, watching Luke's reaction carefully. If Luke was surprised by Robert's knowledge of the connection, he didn't show it. "We grew up together, old friends. At Sunny Pines Orphanage." A flicker of something. Concern. Wariness crossed Luke's face before he regained his composure. "You've been checking up on us. I'm a curious man." Robert turned fully toward Luke. "That ring she wears, where did she get it?" Luke hesitated just a beat too long. "Family heirloom, I believe." "Interesting, since she has no known family." Robert's voice hardened slightly. "Unless you count each other." Before Luke could respond, they were interrupted by Harold Jennings, slightly flushed from champagne and celebration. "Robert, I've been looking everywhere for you. The photographer wants pictures of both families together." His gaze landed on Luke. "Dr. Thompson, isn't it? Ryan mentioned you'd become the family physician. Didn't realize you were close enough for wedding invitations." "Dr. Thompson was just leaving," Robert said smoothly. "Medical emergency. Isn't that right, doctor?" Luke's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly at the dismissal. "Actually, terribly sorry to hear that," Harold cut in, gripping Luke's shoulder in a gesture that appeared friendly, but carried unmistakable force. "Perhaps another time." Luke nodded, understanding the power dynamics at play. "Of course. Congratulations again, Mr. Hayes, Mr. Jennings." He walked away, pulling out his phone as he went. "Interesting young man," Harold remarked, watching Luke's retreat. "Very interested in your family affairs, I've noticed." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Have you now? And how would you know that, Harold?" Harold's smile remained fixed, but his eyes cooled. "Small business community, Robert. Word gets around. Shall we join the others for photos?" As they walked toward the garden where the photographer was setting up, Robert found himself ambushed by memories of another day. 25 years earlier, Sarah, heavily pregnant, calling him frantically about documents she'd found in his office. Papers that implicated Harold in massive financial fraud. He'd been out of town, promised to return immediately by the time he reached home. Fire engines surrounded what remained of the East Wing. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes," the fire chief had said, his face grim with soot and regret. "The fire spread too quickly. Your wife, the baby." Robert had collapsed there on the driveway, his world reduced to ash and accusation. The investigation concluded it was an electrical fire, faulty wiring in the old section of the house, But Sarah's final panicked call had planted a seed of suspicion that never died. Now, standing shoulder to shoulder with Harold for photographs, Robert felt that suspicion bloom anew. "Smile, gentlemen," chirped the photographer, "like you're actually happy to be family." Grace excused herself from the dance floor, her wedding gown swishing elegantly as she sought a moment's respite. The day had been perfect. Her father finally reconciling with the Hayes family, Ryan as handsome and charming as ever. Yet something felt off. Her father's smile didn't reach his eyes. Eleanor's strange outburst. And why had her father been so insistent that she clear out his home office before the wedding? She slipped into the estate's library, seeking quiet. To her surprise, Ryan's father was already there, examining the bookshelves with a tumbler of scotch in hand. "Mr. Hayes," she said, startled. "Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." Robert turned, his expression softening. "Grace, please, we're family now. Call me Robert," she smiled, crossing to where he stood. Hiding from the festivities, too. Just taking a moment. He studied her face. "You know, your mother-in-law would have loved you. Diane, Ryan speaks fondly of her." "No," Robert said quietly. "Sarah, my first wife." Grace felt a strange chill. Her father rarely mentioned Sarah Hayes, even when discussing the longtime rivalry between their families. "I don't know much about her," she admitted. "Few do anymore." Robert traced the spine of a leather-bound book. "She was brilliant, worked in accounting before we married, had an eye for detail, could spot discrepancies in financial statements that everyone else missed." His voice took on a distant quality. "She was looking into some documents the day she died. Documents concerning your father's company." Grace's mouth went dry. "What kind of documents?" Before Robert could answer, the library door opened. Ryan entered, his face lighting up at the sight of his new wife. "There you are, Dad. They're cutting the cake soon," he approached, sliding an arm around Grace's waist. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Grace said quickly, her mind still processing Robert's words. "Just getting to know my father-in-law better." Ryan glanced between them, sensing undercurrents he couldn't quite identify. "Well, can't start our marriage with missed traditions. Come on, both of you." As they returned to the reception, Grace caught sight of the young waitress, Zoe, conferring intently with Dr. Thompson in a corner. There was something oddly familiar about both of them, though she couldn't place what. Her father materialized beside her, his hand firmly grasping her elbow. "There's my beautiful girl, ready for cake." "Dad," she said carefully, "I found something while organizing your office last week. Old newspaper clippings about the Hayes Mansion fire." Harold's smile remained intact, but his fingers dug painfully into her arm. "Ancient history, sweetheart. Best forgotten. Especially today." His gaze drifted to where Zoe was serving champagne. "Why don't you find Ryan? I need a word with the catering staff." As he walked away, Grace felt the distinct sensation of puzzle pieces clicking together, though the picture remained frustratingly unclear. In the quiet of a service hallway, Luke showed Zoe the text he'd just received. "DNA results rushed. 99th of a 98% probability of biological sibling relationship," she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "Luke, we're actually siblings, probably twins." His hands were shaking slightly, the validation of years of searching overwhelming him momentarily. And Eleanor said, "Babies, plural, but we look nothing alike. Fraternal twins, different eggs, different genetics." Luke pocketed his phone. "I need to get samples from Robert Hayes without raising suspicion, if he's our biological father." "He is," Zoe said with conviction. "You saw how he reacted to me, to the ring, and why else would Harold be so nervous?" Luke peered through the doorway at the reception. "Harold is watching you like a hawk, and he just sent the old housekeeper home in his personal car. Getting rid of witnesses," Zoe murmured. "Luke, what if he realizes who we are, what we know? That's why we stick to the plan. Get through tonight. Gather more evidence." Luke's expression hardened. "If Harold Jennings really killed our mother and separated us to cover up his crimes, he's not going to suddenly develop a conscience now." The sound of approaching footsteps silenced them. Luke slipped back toward the reception, while Zoe busied herself arranging glasses on a tray. Harold Jennings rounded the corner, his tuxedo impeccable but his composure showing cracks. He stopped short at the sight of Zoe. "You," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "I'd like a word." Behind him, Robert Hayes appeared, his expression equally determined. "Actually, Harold, I believe the young lady was just coming to assist with a special toast. If you'll excuse us." The two men locked eyes, decades of rivalry crystallizing into something darker. Zoe stood frozen between them, the emerald ring on her finger catching the light like a tiny green flame. The past was no longer buried. It was standing in that hallway, demanding to be acknowledged. 25 years earlier, rain lashed against the windows of the Hayes mansion, thunder rolling across the sky like artillery fire. In the master bedroom of the East Wing, Sarah Hayes paced back and forth, one hand pressed against her heavily pregnant belly, the other clutching a manila folder. "Come on, Robert. Pick up," she whispered as the phone rang again. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating her reflection in the bedroom mirror. Dark hair wild around her face, amber eyes wide with fear. Finally, her husband's voice came through the line. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "Robert, I found something in your study." Her voice trembled. "Financial statements from the Jennings Corporation. There are huge discrepancies. Millions being funneled through offshore accounts. Harold's signature is on everything." There was a moment of silence on the line. "Where did you find these?" "They were mixed in with the quarterly reports you asked me to review." Sarah winced as a contraction gripped her. "Robert, I think my water just broke." "What? It's too early." "The baby's coming now," she gasped. "And Robert, there's something else. I think Harold knows I have these documents. Someone's been calling all day, hanging up when I answer. I'm 3 hours away. I'll call an ambulance and leave immediately." Robert's voice sharpened with urgency. "Lock all the doors, Sarah. Don't let anyone in except medical personnel." Another contraction hit, stronger this time. "Hurry, Robert, please." After hanging up, Sarah secured the documents in her personal safe behind a painting of the Italian coastline. As she stepped back, her eyes fell on the small emerald ring Robert had given her for their anniversary. Unique, with a hidden compartment designed to hold a tiny love note, acting on instinct. She removed the papers, photographed each page with a micro camera, and carefully placed the microfilm inside the ring's secret chamber. Whatever happened, there would be evidence. The doorbell rang just as another contraction doubled her over. "Mrs. Hayes," called a woman's voice. "I'm Eleanor, from the Jennings household. Mr. Jennings sent me to help until the ambulance arrives." Sarah hesitated, pain clouding her judgment. "How did you know I needed help?" "Your husband called Mr. Jennings since he was closer." "Please, ma'am, you shouldn't be alone." Desperation won out over suspicion. Sarah unlocked the door to find a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and practical hands. "The baby's coming fast," Sarah managed between contractions. "Let's get you comfortable," Eleanor said, efficiently gathering towels and hot water. "I've helped deliver babies before." The next hour passed in a blur of pain and effort. The storm knocked out power just as Sarah gave her final push. "It's a girl," Eleanor announced in the dim emergency lighting. Wrapping the crying infant in a soft blanket, Sarah reached for her daughter, tears mingling with sweat. "She's beautiful." "Rest a moment," Eleanor advised, placing the newborn in a bassinet. "I'll check if the ambulance is here." But as Eleanor turned to leave, Sarah felt another contraction. "Wait, I think there's another baby." Eleanor's eyes widened in surprise. "Twins. The doctor didn't mention—" "Please," Sarah gasped. "Help me." 20 minutes later, a second cry pierced the stormy night. "A boy," Eleanor said, her voice filled with wonder. "You have twins, Mrs. Hayes." Sarah lay back, exhausted but jubilant. "Their names are Luke and Zoe, family names." As Eleanor cleaned the second infant, Sarah reached for the emerald ring on her nightstand. With trembling fingers, she carefully stitched it into the lining of Zoe's blanket, insurance that her daughter would always have proof of what she'd discovered. "Should anything happen, I'm going to try the phone again," Eleanor said, placing the boy in the bassinet beside his sister. The ambulance should have been here by now. Left alone with her newborns, Sarah fought against encroaching weakness from blood loss. Something felt wrong, beyond the unexpected arrival of twins. The documents, Harold's possible knowledge of them, the ambulance's delay. She reached for her cell phone, dialing Robert again. "Robert, the babies are here. Twins. A boy and girl. But something's wrong, I think. The bedroom door swung open, but it wasn't Eleanor who returned. Harold Jennings stood framed in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the dim emergency lighting. Sarah. Congratulations are in order, it seems. Sarah instinctively shifted to shield her infants. Harold. Where's Eleanor? Making tea. He stepped into the room, his expensive shoes silent on the thick carpet. I came as soon as Robert called. Such a shame he's stuck in traffic with this storm. Sarah's fingers curled around her phone. I just spoke with him. He'll be here soon. I doubt that. Harold's voice remained pleasant, conversational. Roads are flooded, trees down everywhere. The ambulance is unfortunately delayed as well. Harold approached the bassinet, looking down at the newborns with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read. Twins? How unexpected. Sarah's instincts screamed danger. Harold, what do you want? His smile vanished. You know exactly what I want, Sarah. The documents you found. Where are they? I don't know what you're talking about. Harold laughed softly. Always the loyal wife. Robert doesn't deserve your protection, you know. He was planning to use those documents to destroy me, to take over my company while I rotted in prison. They're your signatures on those fraudulent transfers, Sarah countered, trying to reach the emergency call button by her bed. Harold caught her wrist in a painful grip. Where are they? I don't have them anymore, she lied. Robert took them last week. His face hardened. You're lying. He's been out of town, and Eleanor saw you hide something before you let her in. He released her wrist and straightened. No matter. They won't survive what's coming next anyway. Sarah's blood ran cold. What have you done? Gas lines are so tricky in these old houses, Harold said, almost regretfully. All those leaks. One spark from faulty wiring during a storm like this. He shrugged expressively. You're going to kill infants. Sarah struggled to sit up. Your own goddaughter's siblings. Something flickered in Harold's eyes. Doubt, perhaps. But it vanished quickly. Collateral damage. I can't go to prison, Sarah. I won't. He glanced at his watch. You have about 5 minutes before the East Wing becomes unlivable. I suggest you use that time to tell me where the documents are. Get out, Sarah spat. And if you touch my children, you'll what? Harold stepped back toward the door. Time's ticking, Sarah. The moment he left, Sarah lunged for the bassinet, adrenaline temporarily overcoming her weakness. She gathered both infants in her arms, wrapping them tightly in their blankets. The emerald ring was secure in Zoe's blanket, evidence of Harold's crimes that would survive even if she didn't. She staggered toward the door, but smoke was already seeping under it from the hallway. The bedroom window was her only option. If she could reach the balcony, maybe lower the babies to safety, the sound of breaking glass downstairs confirmed her worst fears. Harold was accelerating his plan. Choking on thickening smoke, Sarah made it to the window, throwing it open to the raging storm outside. Hold on, my loves, she whispered to her children. Daddy will find you, I promise. She never heard the explosion that ripped through the lower floor, sending flames shooting up the grand staircase. In those final moments, Sarah Hayes' thoughts were only of her children and the evidence she'd hidden that might someday bring justice. Outside the burning mansion, Harold Jennings watched from his car, rain streaming down the windshield. The East Wing was fully engulfed now, the fire spreading despite the downpour. He'd called the fire department anonymously, timed so they'd arrive too late to save anyone but early enough to prevent the entire estate from burning. As he turned to leave, movement near a side entrance caught his eye. Eleanor stumbled out, her uniform singed, supporting a barely conscious Sarah who clutched 2 blanket-wrapped bundles. Harold's careful plan collapsed in that instant. Without thinking, he was out of his car, racing toward them through the rain. Help her! Eleanor screamed as she saw him. But Harold wasn't there to help. In one fluid motion, he took the infants from Sarah's weakening arms. Get her to safety, he ordered Eleanor. I'll protect the children. Eleanor hesitated, clearly torn. Go, Harold commanded. The whole wing could collapse any minute. As Eleanor helped Sarah toward the front drive, Harold retreated toward his car, the 2 newborns squirming in his arms, looking down at their tiny faces. He felt a moment of genuine indecision. They were innocent, completely innocent, but they were also witnesses. If Sarah survived, if she told Robert what had happened, The sound of approaching sirens decided him. He couldn't be found here, not with the babies. He placed them carefully in his car, then returned to the burning mansion. One final piece of business to attend to. Later that night, as police questioned a shell-shocked Robert Hayes about the tragedy that had claimed his wife and newborn children, Harold Jennings drove through the storm to Sunny Pines Orphanage. 2 sleeping infants in the back seat. He told himself he was being merciful, that abandoning them was better than the alternative, that they would be adopted into good homes and never know the truth. What he didn't know was that Sarah's emerald ring, with its damning evidence, remained safely hidden in Zoe's blanket, a silent witness waiting for justice. Grace slipped away from the reception, her wedding dress rustling softly as she moved through the quiet hallways of the Whitaker Estate. The conversation with Robert Hayes had left her unsettled, planting questions she couldn't ignore. Even on her wedding day, her father's home office had always been off-limits, but last week he'd asked her to organize it before the wedding, a strange request that now seemed calculated. What had he been trying to hide? Or perhaps, what had he wanted her to find? She reached the estate's business center, a small room equipped with computers for guests, empty. Thankfully, Grace sat down at a terminal, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Sarah Hayes, fire. Hayes Mansion. The search results loaded quickly. News articles from 25 years ago described the tragedy. A pregnant woman lost in a house fire, her husband devastated. The official cause, electrical failure during a severe storm. A soft knock at the door startled her. Grace quickly closed the browser window. Sorry to interrupt. It was Thompson, Robert's physician. The staff said I might find a printer in here. Of course. Grace gestured to the equipment in the corner. Help yourself. Instead of moving to the printer, Luke closed the door behind him. Mrs. Hayes, I think we need to talk. Grace tensed. About the articles you were just reading. About the fire. His expression was carefully neutral. And about your father's involvement in it. Grace stood, her wedding dress suddenly feeling constricting. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Luke's voice remained gentle. You've noticed things don't add up. Your father's reaction to Zoe. The old housekeeper's outburst. The mysterious documents your new father-in-law mentioned. How do you know about... Grace stopped, reassessing the man before her. Who are you really, Dr. Thompson? Luke hesitated, then pulled out his phone. First, I need to show you something. He handed it to her, displaying a DNA analysis report. This confirms that Zoe Harper and I are siblings, likely fraternal twins, and based on timing and circumstances, we have reason to believe we're the children of Robert and Sarah Hayes. Grace sank back into the chair, the implications washing over her. That's impossible. Those children died in the fire. Did they? Luke leaned against the desk. Or did someone take them that night? Someone who had a vested interest in making sure Sarah Hayes and any evidence she had disappeared forever. My father would never... Grace began automatically, then stopped, the newspaper clippings she'd found while organizing his office. His insistence on this marriage to Ryan. His reaction to Zoe and her emerald ring. You've seen something? Luke observed quietly. Something that made you suspicious enough to be researching the fire on your wedding day. Grace met his gaze. I found a file hidden in my father's office. Old newspaper clippings about the fire, but with notes in the margins, calculations, insurance payouts, and a list of offshore account numbers. May I? Luke gestured to the computer. Grace nodded, moving aside. Luke pulled up a secure email account and logged in. Zoe and I have been investigating for years. We know Sarah Hayes discovered evidence of financial fraud at Jennings Corporation before she died. We believe your father orchestrated the fire to silence her and destroy that evidence. But she was pregnant, with twins apparently. Grace's voice hardened. You're saying he knowingly tried to kill infants? Luke navigated to a folder of scanned documents. Initially, perhaps, but according to what we've pieced together, he encountered Sarah and the newborns outside the burning house. Instead of finishing what he started, he took the babies to an orphanage. Why not kill them too? The bluntness of her own question shocked Grace, but she needed to understand. A moment of conscience, practicality, the fire department was already on the way. Luke shrugged, but he separated us, ensuring we'd disappear into the system. What he didn't count on was this. He opened an image of an emerald ring, the same one Zoe wore. Sarah hid microfilm in this ring's secret compartment. Copies of the documents implicating your father. She stitched it into Zoe's baby blanket before the fire. It's our link to the truth, and the evidence we need. Grace felt sick. If what you're saying is true, my entire life has been built on a lie. Not your life, Luke corrected gently. Your father's freedom. The door opened suddenly. Zoe stood there, breathing hard. Luke, we need to go. Harold's looking for both of us. And he doesn't look happy. Grace turned to Zoe, seeing her in a new light. The sister-in-law she never knew she had. Wait, she said, making a split-second decision. I want to help. Zoe eyed her suspiciously. Why would you help us? Because if my father did what you say, he needs to face justice. Grace stood, determination replacing shock. And because a family was destroyed, maybe it can be rebuilt. Luke and Zoe exchanged glances. We need access to the original documents, Luke said. If they still exist. They might, Grace replied. That hidden file I found. It mentioned a storage unit. I have the address and key code. Grace. Honey, where are you? Ryan's voice echoed down the hallway. Go back to the reception, Luke advised quickly. Act normal, we'll contact you later. Grace hesitated, then nodded. The storage unit is on 4th and Main, number 227, code 0517. Be careful if my father realizes what you're doing. He's already suspicious, Zoe said grimly. I need to get back to serving before he notices I'm gone, Luke. You should leave through the service entrance. As they prepared to separate, Grace caught Zoe's arm. That ring, may I see it? Zoe reluctantly slipped the emerald ring from her finger, revealing the intricate gold setting. I've seen this before, Grace whispered. In a photograph my father keeps hidden in his desk. Sarah was wearing it. It's our proof, Zoe confirmed, sliding it back on. And our connection to our mother. Grace nodded, composing herself. I'll keep him distracted while you slip out. As she rejoined the reception, Grace found herself seeing everything differently. Her father, laughing with business associates, Robert Hayes, watching the door as if expecting someone. Ryan, her new husband, innocently caught between two families built on secrets and lies. There you are. Ryan appeared at her side, handsome in his tuxedo. I've been looking everywhere. Everything okay? Grace forced a smile. Perfect. Just needed a moment to breathe. Ryan tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I get it. It's overwhelming. He nodded toward their fathers, now standing together for photographs. Never thought I'd see that. Hayes and Jennings smiling in the same frame. Grace observed the two men. The facade of friendship barely concealing decades of animosity. Appearances can be deceiving. Speaking of appearances, Ryan lowered his voice. Did you notice how weird Dad's been acting? Every time that waitress comes near, he looks like he's seen a ghost. I noticed. Grace chose her words carefully. Ryan, what do you know about your father's first wife? About Sarah? Ryan shrugged. Not much. Dad doesn't talk about her. I know there was a fire, that she was pregnant. It destroyed him for years. And her family, did they never question the circumstances? She was an orphan herself, from what I understand. No one to ask questions. Ryan studied her curiously. Why the sudden interest? Before Grace could answer, Harold appeared beside them, his smile tight. There's my beautiful daughter and new son-in-law. Mind if I steal Grace for a dance? As Harold led her to the dance floor, his grip on her waist was uncomfortably firm. You disappeared for quite a while, he remarked casually. Anything interesting? Just wedding day jitters, Grace lied, her heart pounding. Needed a moment alone. Harold's eyes narrowed slightly. Alone, strange, because Eleanor said she saw you speaking with Dr. Thompson in the business center. Grace maintained her composure with effort. He was looking for a printer. We barely spoke. I see. Harold's smile didn't reach his eyes. Just be careful around him, sweetheart. I've heard concerning things about his interest in the Hayes family. Very investigative. I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Grace replied, scanning the room discreetly for Luke and Zoe. Neither was visible. No matter, Harold said smoothly. Today is about celebration, not suspicion, although... He paused, his gaze sharpening. I noticed you've been researching the Hayes Mansion fire. Grace missed a step. How did you... Browser history, darling. I was checking email on your laptop last week. His tone remained light, but his eyes had turned to ice. Curiosity is natural, but some stones are better left unturned, for everyone's sake. The threat beneath his words was unmistakable. As the music ended, Harold kissed her cheek with paternal affection that now felt hollow. Enjoy your reception, Grace. Tomorrow you and Ryan leave for your honeymoon. And all these... He waved a hand vaguely. Distractions will be forgotten. As he walked away, Grace felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Across the room, Robert Hayes watched her with an intensity that suggested he'd observed the entire exchange. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, Grace made her choice. Whatever consequences came, whatever it cost her, the truth needed to be exposed. For Sarah, for the twins who'd lost their mother and each other, for Ryan, who deserved to know his true siblings, even for herself, the daughter of a man who may have destroyed a family for profit. The storage unit reeked of mildew and forgotten things. Luke ran his flashlight beam across stacked cardboard boxes, each marked with Harold Jennings' precise handwriting. Tax records, business contracts, client files. He read aloud, moving deeper into the narrow space. Nothing labeled evidence of my criminal past. Unfortunately, Zoe checked her watch. We have maybe an hour before someone notices we're both missing from the reception. Here. Luke pointed to a metal lockbox partially hidden behind a filing cabinet. That looks promising. Zoe knelt beside it, examining the combination lock. 4 digits. Any ideas? Try the code Grace gave us for the storage unit. 0517. Zoe twisted the dials. The lock clicked open. Birth date, maybe. Inside, they found a leather portfolio containing yellowed newspaper clippings about the Hayes Mansion fire, similar to what Grace had described finding in Harold's office. But beneath those was a sealed manila envelope marked simply SH. Luke's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside were photographs. Sarah Hayes at various social functions, sometimes with Robert, sometimes alone, and beneath those, what they'd been searching for. Original financial documents with Harold's signature, authorizing transfers to offshore accounts, falsified reports to shareholders, evidence of systematic fraud stretching back decades. She really did find proof, Zoe whispered. No wonder he wanted her silenced. Luke carefully photographed each document with his phone. This is enough to reopen the investigation into the fire, maybe even bring charges. At the bottom of the envelope, they found something unexpected. A silver locket containing a photo of Sarah holding newborn twins. On the back was engraved, Luke and Zoe Hayes, born May 17, 1999. Our birth date, Zoe said, voice catching, and confirmation of our names. Luke stared at the tiny faces in the photograph. Why would Harold keep this? Why not destroy everything? Insurance, Zoe suggested. Leverage if Robert ever suspected anything, as Luke replaced the documents exactly as they'd found them. His phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Father noticed your absence, coming to find you. Get out now. Time's up, he told Zoe, snapping the lockbox shut. They rushed to exit the storage facility, only to find a black SUV pulling into the parking lot. Harold Jennings stepped out, followed by 2 men who were clearly not wedding guests. Back door, Luke whispered, pulling Zoe toward the rear emergency exit. They slipped out just as they heard Harold's voice echoing through the facility. Find them now. Back at the Whitaker Estate, the reception continued in full swing. Most guests remained oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. Grace maintained a perfect smile while scanning the room continuously for signs of Luke or Zoe. You seem distracted, Ryan observed, handing her a champagne flute. Second thoughts already. Grace squeezed his hand. Never about you. It's just, there's something you should know, Ryan. About your family. About mine. Ryan's brow furrowed. That sounds ominous. It is. Grace hesitated, unsure how to begin unraveling 25 years of deception. It's about your mother, your birth mother. Before she could continue, Robert Hayes approached, his expression grave. Ryan, Grace, I apologize, but I need to speak with you. Privately, he led them to a quiet anteroom off the main hall. To Grace's surprise, Zoe was already there, her server's uniform exchanged for casual clothes. Luke stood beside her, a protective hand on her shoulder. What's going on? Ryan demanded, looking between them in confusion. Dad? Robert took a deep breath. Son, I've suspected something for months now. Today confirmed it. He gestured to Luke and Zoe. I'd like you to meet your brother and sister. Ryan stared in disbelief. That's not possible. Mom and I never... Not Diane's children, Robert clarified gently. Sarah's, your birth mother's, the babies who died in the fire, Ryan said slowly. But that's a lie, Zoe finished. We didn't die. We were taken to an orphanage and separated. I kept this all these years. She held up the emerald ring. It was our mother's, hidden in my baby blanket. Ryan turned to Luke, studying his face. You're my doctor. You've been treating our family for years. I didn't know at first, Luke explained. I felt a connection to Robert that I couldn't explain when I reconnected with Zoe as adults, and we compared notes about our pasts. We started investigating. DNA tests confirm it, Robert added. They're my children, Ryan, your half-siblings. Ryan sank into a chair, overwhelmed. But how? Who would take newborn babies? The room fell silent. Finally, Grace spoke. My father, Harold Jennings, orchestrated the fire to silence your mother, who had discovered evidence of his financial crimes. Ryan looked at her in shock. You knew about this. I just found out today, Grace assured him. I've been helping Luke and Zoe gather evidence, which we now have, Luke said, pulling out his phone. Documents proving financial fraud, photos of us as newborns with our mother, and this. He held up the silver locket. Proof that Harold knew exactly who we were when he left us at that orphanage. Robert took the locket with trembling hands. Sarah had this made when we learned she was pregnant. He opened it, staring at the tiny photograph inside. She never got to see you both together. The doctors thought she was carrying one child. The fire wasn't an accident, Zoe said quietly. It was deliberately set to destroy evidence and silence our mother. Ryan looked up, anger replacing shock. You're accusing Grace's father of murder. Yes, Luke said firmly, and attempted murder of 3 others, including his own goddaughter's siblings. Grace placed a calming hand on Ryan's arm. I've seen documents in my father's office, newspaper clippings about the fire with notes in his handwriting, and I found records of the storage unit where Luke and Zoe just discovered more evidence. This is insane, Ryan said, standing abruptly. We should call the police. They're on their way, Robert confirmed. Along with the FBI, financial crimes across state lines fall under federal jurisdiction. A commotion outside the door interrupted them. Harold Jennings burst in, his tuxedo slightly disheveled, his face flushed with anger that turned to cold calculation when he saw them all together. Family meeting, he asked with forced lightness. How touching, though I don't recall these 2 being on the guest list. He nodded toward Luke and Zoe. It's over, Harold, Robert said quietly. We know everything. Harold's smile didn't waver. Know what exactly? That you've allowed 2 strangers to convince you they're your long-lost children? Really, Robert, grief can make people gullible, but this is pathetic. We have the documents Sarah found, Luke countered. The ones you tried to destroy in the fire, microfilm, preserved in my sister's emerald ring all these years. Harold's composure flickered momentarily. Preposterous. We also have this, Zoe added, holding up the locket. From your storage unit, our names and birth date engraved on it. Proof you knew exactly who we were when you abandoned us. For the first time, real fear showed in Harold's eyes. He glanced toward the door, calculating escape routes. Why did you keep these things? Grace asked her father. Why not destroy everything? Insurance, Robert guessed, watching his old rival closely. In case I ever got too close to the truth, you could produce evidence that my children were alive. Make me choose between justice for Sarah and finding them. Harold's smile returned, colder now. Always the clever one. Robert, but you're forgetting something crucial. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small handgun. I'm still in control here, Grace gasped. Dad, don't... Be quiet, Grace. Harold's voice was eerily calm as he pointed the weapon at Luke and Zoe. 25 years I've kept this secret. I'm not going to prison now because of some orphans with delusions of grandeur. They're not delusions. Robert stepped forward, placing himself between the gun and his children. All of his children. DNA doesn't lie, Harold. Neither does ballistics, Harold replied. Put the phone down, doctor. No calling for help. Luke slowly set his phone on a side table, the screen still displaying the evidence they'd gathered. Here's what's going to happen, Harold continued. I'm taking my daughter and leaving. The rest of you will stay here until we're well away. After that, he shrugged. I'm sure we can come to some arrangement. I'm not going anywhere with you, Grace said firmly, moving to stand beside Ryan. You killed his mother. You tried to kill his siblings. You're not my father anymore. Harold's expression hardened. Don't be dramatic, Grace. Everything I've done has been for our family's future. For your future. You mean for yourself, Grace countered. You were willing to kill infants to cover up your crimes. They would have died in that fire if that meddling housekeeper hadn't helped Sarah escape, Harold snapped, his control finally slipping. I had no choice but to take them. Abandoning them was merciful compared to the alternative. The confession hung in the air. Even Harold seemed surprised by his own words. That's all we needed to hear, said a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see 2 police officers and a man in an FBI windbreaker, weapons drawn. Behind them stood Eleanor, the elderly housekeeper, her eyes fixed on Harold with a mixture of sorrow and vindication. Harold Jennings, the FBI agent announced. You're under arrest for fraud, arson, attempted murder, and the murder of Sarah Hayes. As the officers moved to handcuff him, Harold made a desperate lunge toward the window. Robert tackled him, the 2 men grappling as the gun went off, the bullet shattering a vase inches from Zoe's head. In seconds, the officers had subdued Harold, forcing him to the ground as they led him away. He looked back at Grace, his expression a mixture of fury and betrayal. You chose them over your own father, he spat. Grace met his gaze steadily. I chose the truth, something you should have done 25 years ago. As Harold disappeared through the doorway, Ryan put his arm around his new wife, while Robert embraced Luke and Zoe for the first time. I never stopped looking, Robert whispered. I just didn't know what I was looking for. The reception hall fell silent, as Harold Jennings was escorted through it in handcuffs, flanked by FBI agents. Guests froze mid-conversation, champagne glasses suspended halfway to parted lips. The string quartet trailed off into discordant notes before stopping altogether. Ladies and gentlemen, the lead FBI agent announced, we apologize for the interruption. This is a federal matter involving Mr. Jennings only. The celebration may continue, though we'll need statements from some of you. A buzz of shocked whispers swept through the crowd as Harold was led outside to a waiting vehicle. Photographers who had been documenting the wedding now frantically captured this unexpected development. In the anteroom, Robert Hayes stood with his 3 children and new daughter-in-law, all of them processing the rapid turn of events. I should address the guests, Ryan said, running a hand through his hair. They deserve some explanation. Grace nodded. We'll do it together. What do we tell them? Zoe asked, still visibly shaken by the gunshot that had nearly hit her. The truth. Robert straightened his tie. Decision made. Yes, a simplified version. But the truth. No more secrets. Together they returned to the reception hall. The crowd immediately hushed as they took their places at the head table. Ryan tapped a spoon against his champagne glass, calling for attention he already had. Everyone, I know you're wondering what's happening. His voice was steady despite the turmoil in his eyes. Today was meant to celebrate the union of 2 families. Instead, we've discovered that our families were already connected, through tragedy and deception. He gestured to Luke and Zoe. I'd like to introduce you to my brother and sister, children of my father and his first wife, Sarah. They were believed dead for 25 years, victims of the fire that claimed their mother. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Eleanor, the elderly housekeeper, dabbed tears from her eyes as she sat at a corner table. Harold Jennings has been arrested for his role in setting that fire, Ryan continued, and for the financial crimes he was trying to cover up. I've only just learned the truth myself, Grace added, standing tall beside her new husband. I ask for your understanding as our families process this revelation. A distinguished older woman rose from her seat. And the wedding, she asked with surprising practicality. Where does this leave the marriage? Ryan and Grace exchanged glances. The marriage stands, Ryan said firmly, taking Grace's hand. Grace is not responsible for her father's actions. Our commitment to each other hasn't changed. Relief showed on many faces. This was still a romance, albeit one now fraught with unexpected complications. "I suggest we end the formal reception," Robert interjected. "Those who wish to stay, please do. Those who prefer to leave, we understand completely." As the crowd dispersed into uncertain clusters, Luke approached Eleanor, who sat quietly at her table. "You were there that night," he said, taking the seat beside her. "You helped our mother." Eleanor nodded, her aged hands trembling around her water glass. "I've carried the guilt for 25 years. Harold told me Sarah died in the fire despite our efforts to save her. I had no idea he'd taken you both." "But you recognized Zoe today," Luke prompted. "The eyes," Eleanor said simply. "Sarah's eyes. And when I saw the ring," she shook her head, "I knew Harold was lying all those years ago. But I was afraid. He threatened my family if I ever spoke about that night." "You did speak up," Luke reminded her gently. "Today, when it mattered most." Eleanor reached out to touch his face, her eyes damp. "I delivered you, you know. You and your sister Sarah named you right away. Family names," she said. Zoe joined them, sliding into a chair opposite Eleanor. "Did she get to hold us before?" "Oh yes, dear. She held you both." Eleanor smiled sadly. "She was so happy, despite everything. She stitched that ring into your blanket herself. Said it contained something important, something that would protect you." "It did," Zoe said, touching the emerald ring on her finger. "It led us home." Across the room, Robert was speaking with several stern-looking men in suits, representatives from the SEC, come to discuss the implications of the financial crimes uncovered. Grace stood with Ryan, fielding questions from concerned family members. "It's all happening so fast," Zoe murmured, watching the scenes unfold. 25 years of secrets unraveling in a single day, Luke agreed. It was bound to be explosive. The event coordinator approached them hesitantly. "Dr. Thompson, Ms. Harper, or I suppose it's Ms. Hayes now. Mr. Hayes asked me to show you to the family suite when you're ready. He thought you might want to freshen up before well, whatever comes next." Luke nodded. "Thank you. We'll head there shortly." As the coordinator walked away, Zoe leaned toward her brother. "Family suite. That's going to take some getting used to." "All of this will," Luke replied, glancing at Robert, who was now on his phone, likely dealing with the PR nightmare this revelation would create for Hayes Enterprises. "We came here looking for justice, not family. And now we have both," Zoe said. "Or at least the start of both." Ryan broke away from a cluster of relatives and approached them, his expression still dazed but resolute. "They're taking statements from everyone who was in the anteroom when he confessed. You're handling this remarkably well," Luke observed. "Finding out you have siblings and that your mother was murdered, all on your wedding day." Ryan managed a weak smile. "I'm compartmentalizing. Complete breakdown scheduled for tomorrow." The attempt at humor fell flat, and his face grew serious. "I've always known something was missing in Dad's life. Some piece of him that never recovered after the fire. Now I understand why. We never meant to disrupt your wedding," Zoe said quietly. "No, but Harold's crimes did." Ryan squared his shoulders. "Grace and I talked. We're postponing our honeymoon. This family has been fractured long enough. It's time we all got to know each other." A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. News vans had arrived, reporters clamoring for statements about the arrest of prominent businessman Harold Jennings. "And then there's that," Ryan sighed. "The media circus is just beginning." Robert rejoined them, pocketing his phone. "Security's handling the press. No statements tonight." He looked at his children, all three of them, with a mixture of wonder and sorrow. "I've arranged for privacy, but tomorrow we'll need to address this publicly." The Jennings-Hayes merger was too high profile to avoid scrutiny. "What happens to Jennings Pharmaceuticals now?" Grace asked, approaching with 2 glasses of water. She handed one to Ryan. "Corporate governance falls to the board until ownership is settled," Robert explained. "Your trust shares give you controlling interest." "Grace," she paled slightly, "I don't know the first thing about running a pharmaceutical company. You won't have to. Not immediately." Robert's tone was gentle. "There's time to sort through all of that." Zoe studied Grace with newfound respect. "You turned on your own father today. That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," Grace admitted. "But it was necessary. What he did to your mother, to you both." She shook her head. I couldn't be complicit in covering that up, not even for family. Well, you've got a new family now, Luke pointed out, albeit a rather complicated one. A tentative smile crossed Grace's face. I suppose I do. Brother-in-law, the wedding photographer approached cautiously. Excuse me, Mr. Hayes. Given the circumstances, I wasn't sure if you still wanted family photos. Robert exchanged glances with his children. Actually, yes. The first photos of our complete family, if everyone is willing. They gathered near the grand staircase, Robert in the center, Ryan and Grace to one side, Luke and Zoe to the other. As the photographer arranged them, Zoe removed the emerald ring and held it out to Robert. This belongs to you, she said. It was Mother's. Robert gently closed her fingers back around the ring. It found its way to you for a reason, Zoe. Sarah would want you to keep it. His voice thickened with emotion. Besides, we've extracted the microfilm evidence. The ring can go back to being what it was meant to be. A symbol of love, not a vessel for secrets. As the camera flashed, capturing the newly reunited Hayes family, the emerald glinted on Zoe's finger, no longer evidence, simply an heirloom connecting past to present. Outside, Harold Jennings sat in the back of an FBI vehicle, watching the Whitaker Estate recede in the distance. 25 years of careful planning, undone by an emerald ring, and the children he thought he'd removed from the equation as the car turned onto the highway. Harold closed his eyes, the weight of his choices finally catching up to him. Back at the estate, the ceremony that had begun as a business merger disguised as a love match had transformed into something none of them could have anticipated. The resurrection of a family long thought lost, and the promise of truth after decades of deception. As the evening light faded, Ryan raised his glass in an impromptu toast. To family, he said simply, the one we just discovered. To family, they echoed, their glasses meeting with a crystalline chime that seemed to vibrate with possibility. Federal Detention Center, Philadelphia. The following morning, Harold Jennings sat across from his lawyer in the sterile visitation room. His designer suit exchanged for a drab jumpsuit, his confident demeanor crumbling around the edges. The morning newspapers lay on the table between them, headlines screaming what he had worked 25 years to prevent. Tycoon arrested at daughter's wedding. Presumed dead Hayes heir's return. Decades-old murder solved. This is a nightmare, Harold muttered, pushing the papers away. What are my options, Andrew? The lawyer sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. Limited, frankly. They have your confession on record from multiple witnesses. The financial crimes have a paper trail. The FBI seized everything from your storage unit, including items linking you directly to the Hayes fire and the children's abandonment. It was all circumstantial until I opened my damn mouth. Harold slammed his fist on the table. One moment of weakness. Several moments, actually, the lawyer corrected. The confession at the wedding, the evidence you inexplicably preserved, the decision to keep those children alive in the first place. Harold's eyes narrowed. Are you judging me, Andrew? No, I'm assessing your case. The lawyer leaned forward. The prosecution will paint each of those decisions as moments where your conscience almost prevailed, making you human, but not innocent. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of security doors opening and closing. Grace, Harold finally asked. Has she? No visits? No calls? Andrew's tone was gentle but firm. She's issued a statement through Hayes Enterprises' PR team, expressing shock at the revelations and requesting privacy. Harold nodded slowly, the final weight of what he'd lost settling onto his shoulders. Your arraignment is tomorrow, Andrew continued. I recommend we pursue a plea deal. The evidence is overwhelming, Harold. We need to focus on damage control. What's the point? Harold stared at his reflection in the polished steel table. I've lost everything that mattered anyway. Whitaker Estate. Simultaneous, the morning after the interrupted wedding found the Hayes family gathered in the estate's sunroom, nursing coffee and processing the events of the previous day. Outside, security personnel maintained a perimeter, keeping the press at bay. Channel 5 is reporting that Harold's being arraigned tomorrow, Ryan said, scrolling through his phone. He looked exhausted, dark circles beneath his eyes suggesting a sleepless night. Grace set down her coffee cup. I should be there. Luke looked up sharply. You don't owe him that. Maybe not, Grace agreed. But I need closure. For myself. Robert, who'd been quietly observing his children, nodded. "I understand. I'll arrange security for you." The group fell silent as Eleanor entered, carrying a tray of pastries that no one had requested but everyone tacitly welcomed. "The police just left," she announced, setting down the tray. "They've finished taking my statement." Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged napkins beside the pastries. Zoe rose to help her. "Thank you for coming forward. Eleanor, your testimony connects everything. I should have spoken up years ago," the elderly woman replied, regret lining her face. "But Harold threatened my grandson's medical care if I ever told anyone what I saw that night." Robert looked up in surprise. "Medical care?" Eleanor nodded. "My grandson was born with a heart condition. Needed expensive treatments. Harold arranged everything through Jennings Pharmaceuticals. Experimental treatments, specialists. Made it very clear the help would stop if I ever spoke about Sarah or the fire." "Blackmail," Luke said grimly. "Holding a child's life over your head." "It worked," Eleanor acknowledged. "Until yesterday, when I saw Miss Zoe with that ring, suddenly I couldn't stay silent anymore, no matter the consequences." Robert reached for Eleanor's hand. "Your grandson's care won't be affected. I give you my word." A knock at the door interrupted them. The estate manager entered, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Hayes, there's a Detective Morrison here to see you. Says it's urgent." Robert nodded. "Show him in." Detective Morrison was a weathered man in his 50s, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades observing humanity at its worst. He declined coffee, but accepted a seat at the table. "I'll be brief," he began without preamble. "Mr. Jennings has made a full confession." "That's unexpected," Robert said cautiously. "Apparently, he spent the night reviewing his options and decided to cooperate." Morrison pulled out a small notebook. "In exchange for certain considerations regarding sentencing, he's provided details about the night of the fire that weren't previously known." The room tensed. Luke and Zoe exchanged glances while Ryan moved closer to Grace, who had gone pale. "What details?" Robert asked, his voice carefully controlled. "For starters, he wasn't working alone." Morrison flipped open his notebook. "According to Jennings, Sarah Hayes was actually alive when he left the scene with the twins." Eleanor gasped. "That's not possible. I helped her from the house, but she collapsed. The smoke inhalation. Jennings claims she was weak but conscious," Morrison continued. "He says his original plan was just to destroy the evidence of financial fraud she'd discovered. But when he realized the documents were missing, he made a split-second decision to take the newborns to pressure Sarah into revealing where she'd hidden the evidence. He was using us as leverage." Zoe's voice was barely audible. Morrison nodded. "According to his statement, he told Sarah he would return the children once she handed over the documents. He left her with Eleanor while he took the twins to his car." Robert leaned forward, tension radiating from every line of his body. "And then what happened?" "This is where it gets complicated." Morrison looked uncomfortable. "Jennings claims that when he returned to the spot where he'd left them, both women were gone. He assumed Eleanor had helped Sarah to safety, so he fled with the twins. It wasn't until the next day that he learned Sarah had died at the scene. That contradicts everything we know," Luke objected. "The official report said no bodies were found in the East Wing." "Correct," Morrison agreed. "And here's where Jennings' new statement becomes relevant. He claims someone else was involved that night, someone who ensured Sarah wouldn't survive to identify him as the arsonist." The detective paused, his gaze moving to each face at the table before settling on Robert. "He's accusing your former head of security, James Decker, of returning to the scene and killing Sarah Hayes after Jennings left with the twins." Robert went completely still. "James worked for me for 30 years. He retired 5 years ago. Convenient timing," Morrison noted. "Shortly after the statute of limitations expired on arson, though not on murder." "This is absurd," Robert insisted. "Harold is trying to shift blame." "Perhaps," Morrison conceded, "but we're obligated to investigate, especially since Jennings provided details that weren't public knowledge, like the exact location where Sarah was last seen alive, and specific wounds that weren't mentioned in the coroner's report." Robert's hands clenched into fists. "James was like family. He helped me search for answers after the fire, making him ideally positioned to misdirect that search," Luke pointed out quietly. "Dad, we have to consider the possibility." The word dad hung in the air, The first time Luke had used it, Robert looked at his son, momentarily distracted from the accusations against his former security chief. "We've already brought Decker in for questioning," Morrison continued. "His alibi for that night doesn't hold up after all these years. And we found something interesting when we ran his financials. A series of payments from offshore accounts linked to Jennings, starting the week after the fire and continuing for 5 years." Grace shook her head in disbelief. "So my father is claiming he only committed arson and kidnapping, not murder." "Essentially, yes," Morrison confirmed. "He's still facing significant charges, but if his account proves true, the murder charge would fall to Decker." Eleanor, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. "It's possible," she said hesitantly. "After Harold took the babies, I was helping Sarah toward the front of the property. She was weak but walking. Then James Decker appeared. He said Mr. Hayes had sent him to help, that an ambulance was waiting at the gatehouse. He told me to go back and salvage what I could from the nursery while he helped Sarah." She paused, distress evident on her lined face. "That was the last time I saw her alive." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "If this is true," Ryan said slowly, "it means Harold had an accomplice all along. Someone inside our family's inner circle. It means there's another person responsible for our mother's death," Zoe added, her voice hard. Robert stood abruptly. "I need to see James, now." Detective Morrison held up a hand. "Mr. Hayes, I strongly advise against that. This is an active investigation. 25 years. Detective," Robert's voice was dangerously calm, "I've waited 25 years to know the truth about what happened to my wife. If James was involved, then the police will handle it," Luke said firmly, standing to place a hand on his father's shoulder. "We've come this far following the legal process. Let's not jeopardize justice now." For a moment, Robert seemed ready to argue. Then, looking at the faces of his children, all 3 of them watching him with concern, he relented. "You're right," he acknowledged. "We do this properly. There's one more thing," Morrison added, closing his notebook. "Jennings claims the documents Sarah discovered didn't just implicate him. According to his statement, they revealed a wider conspiracy involving several board members from both companies. If true, this case extends well beyond one man's actions." Grace exchanged a troubled look with Ryan. "The merger?" she said quietly. "It was never about reconciliation. It was about control," Ryan realized. "Consolidating power, burying evidence, and using your marriage as the final seal on a 25-year cover-up," Luke concluded. Outside the estate gates, reporters continued their vigil, unaware that the story they thought they were covering, the sensational return of long-lost heirs, was still unfolding in ways none of them could have anticipated. The truth about Sarah Hayes' death, it seemed, had only begun to emerge from the ashes of that long-ago fire. The Hayes family mansion stood on a hill overlooking the city, a modern fortress of glass and stone that Robert had built after the fire claimed his first home. As the security gate swung open to admit their convoy of vehicles, Luke gazed up at the imposing structure that represented everything he and Zoe had lacked growing up. "Intimidating, isn't it?" Ryan said from the driver's seat. "Not exactly the orphanage," Zoe replied from the back, her attempt at humor falling flat. The 3 siblings had insisted on driving together, leaving Robert to follow with Grace in a separate car. It was a small gesture of solidarity. The Hayes children united, beginning to forge connections independent of their father. "I've lived here my whole life, and still sometimes feel like a visitor," Ryan admitted as they pulled up to the main entrance. "Dad rebuilt after the fire, but I don't think he ever really moved in emotionally, like he was just passing through." Luke nodded thoughtfully. "He was living in the past, with her. With both of you too," Ryan added. "Even when I was growing up, there were boundaries I knew not to cross. Questions about Sarah, about the babies, the east wing of the old house. Inside, the house was a study in tasteful minimalism, expensive but impersonal, like a high-end hotel. A housekeeper greeted them warmly, already informed of the remarkable circumstances. Mr. Hayes called ahead," she explained, leading them through the soaring atrium. "I've prepared rooms for Dr. Thompson and Mrs. Harper. For Mr. Luke and Mrs. Zoe." The correction hung awkwardly in the air, a reminder of identities still in flux. Ryan broke the tension with a casual arm around Luke's shoulders. Maria's been with us since I was 10, he explained. Makes the best chilaquiles you've ever tasted. Maria smiled gratefully at the familiar territory. I'll make them for breakfast tomorrow. A proper welcome. As she led Zoe and Luke to their rooms, Ryan retreated to the kitchen, needing a moment alone. The events of the past 24 hours had shattered his understanding of his family, his marriage, even his own identity. He'd maintained composure for Grace, for his father, for his new siblings. But now, alone in the quiet kitchen, Ryan finally allowed himself to feel. He was no longer an only child. His mother hadn't died in a routine childbirth complication as he'd been told, but murdered after delivering twins who had been stolen and abandoned. His new father-in-law was responsible, and someone his father had trusted implicitly might have been complicit. The sound of car doors closing announced Robert and Grace's arrival. Ryan quickly wiped his eyes and composed himself in the main living room, with its panoramic view of the city below. They gathered like survivors of a shared catastrophe, connected by trauma, uncertain of the path forward. The arraignment has been moved up to this afternoon, Robert announced, setting his phone aside. Harold's lawyer is pushing for a quick appearance to avoid media spectacle. Grace nodded, her face a careful mask. Will they allow visitors afterward? I've arranged it, Robert confirmed, though I still think I need to see him. Grace interrupted firmly. Whatever he's done, he's still my father. I need to understand why. Ryan took her hand, his voice gentle. I'll go with you. We all will, Luke added, surprising everyone. If that's what you want, Grace. She looked at him with genuine gratitude, even after everything he did to your family. Maybe because of it, Zoe said quietly. We've all lived with unanswered questions long enough. Robert observed his children with a mixture of pride and sorrow. They were showing more strength and compassion than he had 25 years ago, when grief had consumed him to the exclusion of all else, including the possibility that his children might still be alive. Before we face Harold, he said, moving to a cabinet near the fireplace. There's something you should see. He removed a leather-bound album and placed it on the coffee table. The cover was embossed with a simple silver emblem, the Hayes family crest. I couldn't keep photographs out where I'd see them daily, Robert explained, his voice rough with emotion. It was too painful, but I couldn't bear to destroy them either. He opened the album to reveal pictures of Sarah, laughing on a beach, serious in a business suit, radiant in her wedding gown. As the pages turned, they witnessed her pregnancy progress, her smile growing alongside her belly. She was beautiful, Zoe whispered, touching a photo where Sarah cradled her pregnant stomach, her amber eyes, so like Zoe's own, bright with anticipation. Brilliant, too, Robert added. She was the one who spotted the irregularities in Jennings Pharmaceuticals' financial reports. I was handling their real estate acquisitions and asked her to review some numbers. She had a gift for seeing patterns others missed. Luke studied a photo where Sarah sat at a desk covered with spreadsheets, her expression focused. That's where I get it from, he mused. The diagnostic instinct, seeing connections. She would have been so proud of you, Robert said. Of all of you. Ryan, who had seen these photos before in childhood glimpses, watched his siblings discover their mother for the first time. There was healing in this moment, he realized. Not just for Luke and Zoe, but for their father who had locked away these memories for too long. The last pages of the album showed the original Hayes mansion, a graceful colonial revival that had been in Robert's family for generations. The East Wing, Robert said, pointing to the section where the fire had started. That's where the nursery was, where Sarah, his voice faltered. Grace moved to sit beside him, a comforting hand on his arm. Where's James Decker now? Luke asked, gently changing the subject. Still in custody, Robert replied. The police found additional evidence in his home, original photos from the fire investigation that were supposedly destroyed, and a key to Harold's storage unit. So they were working together all along, Ryan concluded. Robert nodded grimly. It appears so. James was more than my head of security. He was a friend, someone I trusted completely during the worst time of my life. His expression hardened. If he betrayed that trust, if he was involved in Sarah's death, justice will come, Zoe assured him. For all of them. A notification chimed on Robert's phone. The DA, he explained after checking the message. They've recovered security footage from a bank near Harold's storage facility. It shows James accessing the unit multiple times over the years. Maintaining the insurance policy, Luke suggested. Making sure the evidence was preserved in case Harold ever turned on him. Honor among thieves, Ryan muttered. Robert stood, addressing them all with newfound resolve. We should prepare for the arraignment. Whatever Harold has to say, we face it together, as a family. As they dispersed to get ready, Luke lingered behind with his father. There's something I've been meaning to ask, he said once they were alone. When did you first suspect about Zoe and me? Robert considered the question carefully. There were moments over the years, intuitions I dismissed as grief playing tricks on me, but with you, he looked at Luke with a sad smile. From our first meeting, there was something familiar I couldn't place. The way you focus when you're thinking. The set of your jaw when you're certain about something. Pure Sarah. And you hired me anyway, Luke noted. Kept me close. Subconsciously, perhaps I was trying to keep you in orbit, Robert acknowledged. But I never allowed myself to seriously consider the possibility until I saw Zoe with that ring. Luke nodded, understanding. Grief can be a form of blindness. The cruelest form, Robert agreed. It narrows your vision until all you can see is what you've lost, not what might still remain. He placed a hand on Luke's shoulder, a gesture still new and tentative for both of them. I've missed 25 years of your life, and Zoe's. I can never get that back. No, Luke conceded, but we're here now. That's something. The moment was interrupted by Zoe, who appeared in the doorway with a small box in her hands. I found this in my room, she said, looking puzzled. On the nightstand. Robert smiled. Recognizing it, open it. Inside was a delicate silver charm bracelet with a single charm, a tiny emerald with the letter Z engraved on the setting. I had it made when Sarah was pregnant, Robert explained. A matching one with an L for the baby if it was a boy after the fire. I kept them. Another thing I couldn't bear to part with. Zoe slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, visibly moved. All these years, you kept these things for children you thought were gone. Hope and grief lived side by side, Robert said simply, even when one overshadowed the other, as they left to join the others. Zoe's new bracelet caught the light alongside Sarah's emerald ring, past and present linked in silver and stone, the beginnings of a family reclaiming its connection to what had been lost. The Hayes family, complete for the first time in 25 years, departed together for the courthouse where Harold Jennings would face justice. And they would face him, no longer separated by secrets, no longer defined by loss. Simply, at last, together, 6 months later, the Hayes Tower dominated the city skyline, its gleaming glass exterior reflecting the autumn sunset. On the top floor, Robert Hayes stood at the window of the boardroom. Watching as the corporate helicopter touched down on the landing pad, the aircraft bore the new logo, a stylized emerald surrounded by 3 stars, representing the Hayes siblings who now jointly led the company. The door opened behind him. They've landed, his assistant announced. Shall I send them in when they arrive? Thank you, Susan. And could you bring in the documents we discussed? As his assistant departed, Robert adjusted his tie and surveyed the boardroom. The long mahogany table was set for a formal meeting, the first since the corporate restructuring had been finalized. Placards marked each position. Ryan Hayes, Chief Operations Officer Luke Hayes, Director of Medical Research, Zoe Hayes, Chief Financial Officer Grace Hayes, Jennings, CEO of the newly formed Jennings Hayes Foundation. The past 6 months had transformed both families and their businesses. Harold Jennings was serving a 20-year sentence for arson, fraud, and kidnapping. James Decker had received life imprisonment for Sarah's murder. After physical evidence confirmed Harold's accusation, the wider conspiracy had unraveled as implicated board members turned on each other, leading to a sweeping purge of both companies' leadership throughout the legal proceedings. Robert had worked tirelessly to protect both corporations from collapse. The merger had proceeded, but with different terms, creating not just a stronger business entity, but also the foundation that Grace now led, dedicated to supporting orphaned children and families affected by violent crime. The elevator chimed, and Robert turned as his 3 children entered, still in business attire from their meeting in Boston. Despite the long day, they looked energized. each in their own way transformed by the responsibilities they'd embraced. Ryan, who had once viewed the family business as an obligation, now approached it with passionate commitment. Luke had seamlessly merged his medical expertise with corporate leadership, heading a research division focused on treatments for previously neglected conditions. And Zoe, whose sharp financial mind rivaled her mother's, had restructured the company's accounting practices to ensure transparency. "Success?" Robert asked as they set down their briefcases. "Beyond expectations," Ryan confirmed. "Massachusetts General signed the partnership agreement. Luke's pediatric cardiac research program is fully funded for 5 years." Luke smiled modestly. Having the Hayes name behind it opened doors. "Eleanor's grandson will be the first patient in the clinical trial. Speaking of Eleanor," Zoe added, "she sends her love. She's settling in well at the Cape House." Robert nodded, pleased. After her testimony had helped convict both Harold and James, Eleanor had accepted his offer of a comfortable retirement in the Hayes family's vacation home. Her courage deserved no less. Susan returned with a leather folder, placing it before Robert. "Grace called," she informed them. "She's on her way up from the foundation offices." "Perfect timing," Robert said, checking his watch. "We're all set then." The siblings exchanged curious glances. This meeting had been on their calendars for weeks, marked only as succession planning with no further details. "Dad, is everything all right?" Ryan asked, concern edging his voice. "Your physical last month?" "I'm fine," Robert assured him. "Clean bill of health, thanks to your brother's obsessive monitoring," Luke shrugged. "Professional habit." The elevator chimed again, and Grace entered, elegant in a charcoal suit that complemented her natural poise. Though the revelations about her father had deeply wounded her, she had channeled her pain into purpose, transforming the Jennings legacy from corruption to compassion. "Sorry I'm late," she said, kissing Ryan's cheek before greeting the others. The Youth Center Planning Committee had questions about the budget. "How is the project coming along?" Zoe asked as they took their seats. "On schedule for the spring opening. We're calling it the Sarah Hayes Center for Children." Grace glanced at Robert. "If that still has your approval." "It does." Robert's voice was thick with emotion. "Sarah would be honored." He opened the leather folder and removed 5 sealed envelopes, keeping one and distributing the others around the table. "6 months ago, our families were strangers to each other, connected only by secrets and tragedy," he began. "Today we're building something new together, not just companies or foundations, but a family. That transformation deserves recognition." He gestured for them to open their envelopes. Inside, each was a legal document transferring ownership shares of the merged Hayes-Jennings Corporation, equally to all 4 of the younger generation. 25% each, Luke noted, scanning the document. "Dad, this means you're stepping down as CEO," Robert finished. "Effective today." Surprised murmurs circled the table. "But your controlling interest," Ryan began, "is now yours, collectively." Robert smiled at their astonishment. "The board has already approved the transition. They'll need you to select a new CEO from among yourselves, though I've made my recommendation." He nodded toward Ryan, whose expression shifted from shock to determination as he understood the responsibility being offered. "This is unexpected," Zoe said carefully. "Are you sure this is what you want?" "Dad, I've never been more certain." Robert's gaze moved between them, settling nowhere and everywhere at once. "For 25 years, I built this company as a monument to what I'd lost. Now I want to see what you 4 can build as a testament to what we've found." Grace studied her document thoughtfully. "My father transferred his shares to me from prison, but I never expected to have an equal voice in the company's future. You've earned it," Luke told her. "The foundation is giving both our families a chance at redemption." Robert opened his own envelope, revealing not business documents but a deed. "While you lead the company into its next chapter, I'll be focusing on a personal project." He passed around photographs of the original Hayes Estate property, now cleared and ready for construction. "You're rebuilding the old house?" Ryan asked, surprised. "With modifications," Robert explained. "The main residence, yes, but the east wing will become a memorial garden for Sarah, and I'm adding a guest house for when you all visit." His expression softened. "It's time to reclaim that ground, to make new memories there." The idea of their father living alone in a rebuilt version of the house where such tragedy had occurred concerned them all. But Luke recognized the healing intention behind the gesture. "It's not about dwelling in the past," he said, intuiting his father's thoughts. "It's about acknowledging it while moving forward." "Exactly." Robert smiled gratefully at his son's understanding as they discussed the details of the transition. Susan entered with a small package. "This just arrived from the jeweler, Mr. Hayes." Robert thanked her and carefully opened the box, revealing 3 identical emerald pins, smaller versions of Sarah's ring, each set in a distinctive gold setting. "One final gesture to mark our new beginning," he said, presenting them to his children. "Sarah's emerald ring brought you back to us, Zoe. These represent our commitment that this family will never be separated again." As they each accepted this symbolic gift, a comfortable silence settled over the room, the kind shared only by people who have weathered extraordinary circumstances together and emerged stronger. "To Sarah," Robert said finally, raising his water glass in toast, "for giving me the 3 greatest gifts of my life." "To Mom," the siblings echoed, the words still new on Luke and Zoe's lips but growing more natural with each utterance. Grace added her own tribute. "And to Truth, however painful, that finally set us all free." Later that evening, as autumn twilight settled over the city, Robert stood alone on the rooftop terrace. Below him stretched the empire he had built. Before him lay a future he hadn't dared imagine 6 months ago. "They're remarkable, Sarah," he whispered to the evening breeze. "Everything you would have wanted them to be." The emerald pin on his lapel caught the last light of day, glinting like a small green flame. No longer a reminder of loss, but a beacon of what had been reclaimed. In its facets, he could almost see reflected the journey that had brought them here, a ring that preserved evidence, a fire that failed to destroy love, and the unbreakable bonds of a family that had found its way home against impossible odds. As Robert turned to join his waiting children, he felt Sarah's presence in the autumn air, not as a ghost from his past, but as the foundation upon which their future would be built. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not a monument to grief, but a testament to hope.